one of the most, if not the most celebrated grape variety in the wine world.
No, definitely, thank you.
It has severe drawbacks. It makes the most sublime wine, and it can also make some absolute rubbish. But it has distinct problems in that it's prone to disease. It flowers early and therefore harvests early, which means it's quite difficult to grow in certain climates. It's thin-skinned, so it's subject to rot and everything else. But as I say, at best, and if you make low yields, it produces fantastic wines. Obviously, Burgundy is what I'm talking about here. In fact, in this today, I got an offer from somebody in the trade offering, I think it was one bottle of Romani Conti at £13,000. That's a lot of money. If you multiply that by 12, you're in the big time, really. And of course, he went on about it. But the problem, of course, is that it's widely imitated, or widely, every decent wine area wants to try and produce Pinot Noir, and with greatly varying results. But let me talk about the best of it, which is Burgundy. And indeed, I have got a bottle of Bourgogne Rouge from Beaujolais Mono, which I think is lovely. It also is grown a lot of in eastern France. Switzerland also loves it. It's grown widely in the New World. Some of the best Pinot Noir I've ever drunk outside Burgundy actually came from Tasmania. Fantastic wine. It wasn't cheap, but it's a lot cheaper than you would have had to pay for the same quality in France. But if you make high yields, which is tempting, and it was even tempting in Burgundy in the 80s and 90s, then the quality drops dramatically. So that's something to be aware of. But moving on then to Gamay, which is a great variety I've always absolutely loved. Now, Gamay shares quite a lot with Pinot Noir in that it's thin-skinned. It's also quite subject to disease. It is quite a high-yielding variety, as a matter of fact. And curious enough, it's not actually very widely grown anywhere outside its homeland, which, as we all know, is the Beaujolais region. And in Beaujolais, of course, it went to make Beaujolais Nouveau, which is infamous or famous, whichever way you look at it. It also makes some of the wines, well, all the wine rather, from all the cru Beaujolais: Chirouble, Moulin-Avon, Fleury, Régnier, Bruy, Côte de Bruy, I won't go on, and so on. And I love Gamay because, to my mind, it is the perfect wine. It pleases everybody, the serious wine lover, but also it's an entry-level wine for those people who say, I don't like wine, and I certainly don't like red wine. So I recommend it very, very strongly. And that's really all I'm going to say for the time being. And obviously, I'd be delighted to expand, as far as I'm able, as we go through the tasting. As I say, my bottle, I should say perhaps with Burgundy, the problem is that very few of us these days drink the grander Burgundies. They're just too jolly expensive. I'm sure some people here will have done so, and good for us all who have. My word, they are getting pricey. But I recommend something like a good Bourgogne Rouge from a good grower, and as Paul says, Provenance is everything, because they represent perhaps the backbone and the best value you can find that Pinot Noir can produce. This actually comes from Morange, which is Beaujolais Mono, some growers down in just south of Fontenay, as it happens, and it's lovely, and it's got all the attributes: floral beauty, aromatic, slightly sort of silage rottenness about pure Pinot, a lovely, lovely flavour at best. Who else has got something different? I hope. Paul, where does your bottle come from? You say it's £6. Well, that's a hell of a price. Where does it come
Pinot Noir 675 from Sainsbury's.
Yeah, but where did it originally? What was it made?
It's made by Bouchard.
Oh, you said Bouchard, didn't you?
Yeah.
So it's French.
Yes.
And Burgundy.
Bouchard and Affis. So yeah, it's central France. So I was quite impressed, and I thought 675. It was sitting there on its own on the top shelf, and I went, "Oh dear, I think I've got to try that one." I went for the Bouchard more than I did for the Pinot Noir, to be honest. But I do.
Can I ask? I'm sorry. Why is there such a price divergence for Burgundy? Is it because there's some very small vineyards due to the inheritance laws in France, or are there other reasons?
Well, I mean that you put your finger right on it. It is. I mean, Burgundy is highly parcellated. I mean, one or two of the growers that I used to deal with would talk not about hectares or even hours. They talk about sticks. In other words, the number of vines they actually had. I mean, it really is that small. The area itself is small. They have never grouped together in the way the Bordeaux people did to make the big units. The whole region is the Côte d'Or itself is very small anyway. And the whole world wants some of it. And I'm afraid that puts huge pressure on prices. Land prices are astronomical, and therefore the price of the wine itself goes up. Now, I'm going to talk about this because I think it's very interesting. I talked about the 80s and the 90s, there was a substantial problem. A lot of growers, greedy if you like, desperate if you want to say, were overproducing. The quality went down, but the price remained the same. And it was in danger of giving Burgundy a very bad name. Those days have gone. These days you do pay a very hefty price, but you do get a superlative wine for your money. Yes, and of course, I think I said earlier on, if Pinot Noir, if you keep the yields low, I mean, it's not naturally a high yield anyway. If you keep the yields low, production is pretty small, therefore the price is extremely high.
And some of the complexities of the Burgundies are the fact of the Burgundian inheritance laws, where if a father dies, the vineyard is split exactly between his sons. So you could have two sons who have half of the vineyard each, and one son can produce a really nice wine and the other one not so nice, but yet they both have the same surname.
No, that's exactly right. I mean, the inheritance laws have bedeviled the vineyard industry for a long time, but people have got right. They form agricultural companies called GAECs, GAECs, which can get round it. But that is a very significant point, actually.
So who's got a Pinot Noir? Put Sally forth.
I have a Pinot Noir, but it's from the southern hemisphere. It's from Central Otago in New Zealand. It's a 2014, and it's called a Balisala. I don't know if you recognise this, Martin.
Well, I mean, I don't know the vineyard or the growers, but certainly you raise a very interesting point there, David. I mean, New Zealand has taken the Pinot Noir. It's one of its sort of flagship varieties, actually. But they are all grown in the south, and I have to keep pinching myself to remind myself, in New Zealand, the further south you go, the colder it gets, as opposed to this country. So the further south you get, a Pinot Noir does love a cool climate, actually. And in Burgundy, going back to Burgundy, Burgundy has cold winters and relatively cool summers, much cooler than you have in Bordeaux. But New Zealand and Central Otago is getting well known for, it's becoming like Marlboroughs for Sauvignon. So they go for Pinot Noir. And they're making very, very classy Pinot Noir at a totally reasonable cost, actually. And if I just digress for a few more moments, one of the finest Pinot Noirs I've ever drunk was in Tasmania, in Australia. which is sort of about the same far south as you might get in central Otago, actually. Fabulous wines, but they were so expensive. I was going to ship some, but I lost my nerve, probably with good reason. I wouldn't be able to sell it at the price I would have had to have done. Anyway, I love to see an example from central Otago. That brings up the sort of new wave of Pinot Noir, if you like.
I bought it a couple of years ago from a friend of mine who's a small-time wine importer, dealer. I think I paid about £15 for it.
Yeah,
I'm looking on Vivino, it's about £18 a bottle now. Yeah. But I'm not a big lover of Southern Hemisphere Pinot Noirs. I'm sort of a bit stuck in the mud. I love French Pinots, but I must admit, I didn't want to. I've got some Pinot in my cellar, which French Burgundy, which I don't normally want to get out during the week. They're for the weekends, and so I found a few bottles of this in the cellar. I thought, I'll open that up, and actually I was quite pleasantly surprised. So
smell it from here. But the whole point about Pinot Noir, perhaps I haven't made it. This is too an intimate sort of chat, really. Is the glorious pungency, the delicacy of the fragrance, which is very, very elusive. And too many New World growers, with the best of intentions, that perhaps the climate is too hot, the yields are too high, the soil's not suitable. Pinot Noir loves limestone, as a matter of fact. They can this elusive, gorgeous, beautiful flavour you get from Pinot Noir, which justifies the price we were talking about earlier. The Central Otago, if it's well made, it's a very classy price. 18 quid, all right, it's got a lot of money, but it's not. It's for Pinot Noir. It's a good Pinot Noir. It's a cracking good price, I'd say.
Can I offer you a cheap Pinot Noir from Romania?
Hey.
It's called a country I lived in for 3 years, so I'm particularly partial to it. It's called Sorcova Pinot Noir. It comes from Waitrose. It's currently on sale at £6.39 a bottle, reduced from £7.99. It's lively, fresh red plums and strawberry notes on the nose combined with a silky texture. I haven't opened it this evening because I can't manage 2 bottles in a night. I've actually drank plenty of it. I'll just read a review. As good as a cheap Pinot gets. I've been through more cheap Pinot than I'd care to remember, says this fellow, in the hope of finding some hidden gems. And this is one of the few that I've gone back to buy more of. And fruit to enjoy on its own, light tannin, but enough to make it interesting and work with food, retains a decent Pinot character, good value at the full price, and insanely good at the current offer. Just and it worked well. So there we have it.
Well, I haven't been to Romanian vineyards, but I have been to Bulgarian vineyards. And Romania is just sort of north of Bulgaria, isn't it, roughly?
Yes, absolutely.
And they do make fantastic wines there. They really do. And we all remember the Bulgarian Cabernet. Do you remember of old? But Romania was making wonderful Pinot Noir, 30, 40 years ago, actually. Yes. Yeah. Remarkably good, really. So I love to see that too. And again, at the price, that's a splendid price, really.
It really is, yes. And years ago, after we came back from Central Europe, there was a Romanian Pinot Noir on sale in Asda we used to drink, but I think that's not where they came from. Anyhow, there's my Pinot Noir for you. I'll let somebody else speak and then come back with my Beaujolais.
Yeah, Martin, can we offer a New Zealand Pinot Noir? It actually comes from the North Island, from the Wairarapa, which is just above Wellington. So it's a lovely area if you visit. Yeah. I think it was a present because I don't remember buying it, but it is very, very pleasant. Wairarapa Pinot Noir. So I can't tell you about the cost. But I agree with, I think you and David were saying that the Otago Pinot Noirs are absolutely wonderful, but they are not the cheapest. But
It doesn't mean to say you can't grow Pinot Noir elsewhere. I mean, you're right. At Waipara, I haven't tasted any Pinot Noir, although I've been there. And, you know, I'm not surprised. If you're careful and you've got the right sort of aspect of your site, you probably can make lovely Pinot Noir there. And that again, is good to see, really. And I think it keeps the Burgundians on their toes, not at the top end, because they're incomparable. But further down, it means people have got to go for quality. You can't just sit there producing indifferent Pinot Noir, Bourgogne Rouge, and hope to sell it at a good price. There's plenty of competition, or growing competition there.
This is never going to challenge a really good Burgundy, that's for sure. But actually, it's the first time we've opened this. We've obviously just opened this bottle, and actually, it's a very pleasant drink. It's a bit paler than you'd expect from a French Pinot Noir, and it's a little bit more flinty on the nose. If you know what I mean. It's a bit harder, but it's a very pleasant drink.
But Pinot Noir.
I'm told that during the Wairarapa Wine Week, the train journey home from Wairarapa to Wellington each evening is one riotous party. It takes about an hour or so. Apparently, it is great fun.
Pinot Noir always has a light colour, actually. It's one of the defining things of it.
I think it's even quite well.
Yeah, probably paler than you'd expect. Yeah.
Mm.
Well, it's pale, but then that's very much in the nature of even the best Pinot Noirs, actually. It doesn't go for colour, it goes for different attributes. Anybody got any serious Gamay from Beaujolais there?
Yes,
Well,
I have. Very serious Gamay from Beaujolais. Or shall I let Richard speak first? I've spoken already. Richard?
Oh, you're muted.
You're mute, Richard.
I was saying the master must always. Where have you gone?
Lost him.
Richard Norman is talking, but he's muted.
All right, I'll just talk to you, and then I'll get my Beaujolais out of the way. It is a Dominique Piron Beaujolais Village, priced at $11.99 from Waitrose. And it's briefly described as a wine of France suitable for vegetarians and vegans, which I don't think was a relevant consideration, but there we are. Made from juicy Gamay grapes grown in and around the Crew of Morgon, home of the Piron's independent domain. Vines in this heartland Beaujolais region produce wines of great character and complexity, which is true. It's beautifully sort of smooth and deep and rich.
What's the Gamay?
And not sort of over powerful.
And from berries.
Just a little comment from somebody who bought it. Great Beaujolais wine. Having spent many years visiting this area, this is one of the best we have tasted here. Light and fruity for drinking with or without food. Must be served slightly chilled, as the locals in France enjoy. Thoroughly recommend. So there we have it.
Well, I love to see that. I mean, I think Beaujolais is a fantastic wine. The name was virtually ruined by Beaujolais Nouveau. Nothing wrong with Beaujolais Nouveau, actually. It was cheerful and not expensive, and it was fun. But everybody began to associate Beaujolais with Beaujolais Nouveau, and no one would therefore ever expect anything other than a light, insubstantial, cheap wine from it.
Mm.
And as we know, a good Beaujolais village from the right villages, or one of the crus, the Morgans, the Fleuries, the Chiroubles, the Reniers, and all the rest of them, are fantastic wines. Now, Gamay doesn't age like Pinot Noir, but I've tasted Old Fleury, 20 years old Fleury, shall we say, which has been fantastic and begins to taste a bit like Pinot Noir in its richness and ripeness. The good Beaujolais, I think it has a huge amount to recommend it. I think it's still tainted by the reputation of this wretched Beaujolais Nouveau.
I just as a point on the Beaujolais Nouveau, Martin, you may remember Stephen Kemp who was the Secretary General at the Commonwealth Society, who always ordered 24 bottles of Beaujolais Nouveau, which he used on Christmas Day to go with turkey, on the basis he thought it was the only wine you could serve with turkey effectively with members of the family, because with aged aunts and senior people, they drank it like cordial and thought it and got quite tiddly very quickly and went to sleep. And he thought that was the best usage of Beaujolais Nouveau.
Well, I love Beaujolais. I love hearing that way of Beaujolais. But Morgon's a lovely village, actually, Richard.
Yes.
And I had some lovely growers. I got to know a courtier, a sort of middleman, if you like, a broker, who took me around a lot of the Cru villages, and I found some wonderful growers, made fantastic wine. What's the grower from?
Bertrand Brisson.
Oh, right.
There
are lots of them.
I actually bought this in Morgon. It is 2003, and I probably bought it in about 2006, 7. I have no recollection whatsoever how many francs it probably was in those days, and I was a little nervous the fact that it's nearly 20 years old and may well have been but actually it's thinking brilliantly. And thank you very much for giving me the excuse to open it.
Isn't that nice? I was just saying earlier on, wasn't I, that I was talking about 20-year-old Fleury in this instance. So that's a Morgon 20 years old, which has really not only stood the test of time, it's benefited from it. And I love to hear that.
And the colour, I think, was marginally becoming a tiny bit brown as I started to pour it, but that might have been my imagination. It is actually drinking very well. So cheers, everybody.
Yes.
Cheers.
Cheers, everybody.
Yes.
Cheers, everybody.
Yes.
Cheers, everybody. Yeah.
And thank you, Martin. Once again, thank you.
We have here a Beaujolais which I bought yesterday in Waitrose at $12.99, a Chateau Concy, and it's
Beaujolais. Sure.
Louis Jadot. Oh, wow.
so it's got a good shipping background, and it's actually delicious.
2019.
Yeah. Lovely.
Very, very young, but it's delicious.
Yeah, lovely.
What sort of price, Joe?
It's $12.99.
Good value then.
Well, Chablis are very big in the Rhone Valley, aren't they? But that gives you a degree of confidence it's going to be delicious, isn't it?
Yes.
It was actually quite difficult to find the Gamay grape in Waitrose.
2012. It's a blend of Gamay and Pinot Noir. So I've got the best of both worlds.
What's that called, Robin?
It's called Macon.
Oh, you've got a Macon.
A Macon. Yes, Les Roches Rouges.
His cellar didn't have a pure Gamay in it.
No.
And I still can't go to Waitrose.
What I should have said earlier is that actually neither Gamay nor Pinot Noir, I mean, most varieties are blended, aren't they? Cabernet, Merlot, and the rest of them, Syrah and all the rest of them. But actually, Pinot Noir and Gamay are rarely blended together, but occasionally they are. Maconnais is probably where it's going to happen. So it's lovely to see that. That brings out a very interesting point, I think, actually. You have something the fragrance of the lightness of the Gamay, no doubt, with some of the pungency of the Pinot Noir. There is a wine called Bourgogne Passe-du-Grain, which you may have come across or will come across knocking about, which is a blend of Pinot Noir and Gamay. I've forgotten the exact proportions, but it must be something like, I don't know, 30% Pinot and 15% Gamay has got to be in it, something like that. But that's fermented together and that makes a particularly interesting wine too, really. I haven't got one because I haven't got one.
So is Pinot drunk typically as a young wine?
Pinot?
Yeah.
Well, I think the glory of it is if you keep it, to be quite honest. But I think in many areas of the world where they grow Pinot, probably best to drink it young, because the problem, as you know, in other parts of the world is intense heat, and Pinot doesn't like heat. I mean, it likes a coolish climate, which is why we were talking about earlier on in Central Otago and so on. If it's grown in a hot climate, it becomes all sort of jammy and soupy, if you know what I mean.
Martin, it's Tricia. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're there. Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Beautifully.
Well, Richard didn't put the thing on.
Well, I didn't realise it was on.
Can I just read you? I was looking up the two grapes before. Can I read you something on the internet and just ask you, is it true? For centuries maligned, mistreated and misunderstood, Gamay was outlawed by Philip the Bold in 1395. Some vignerons rebelled, hiding forbidden Gamay vines amongst noble Pinot Noir. In their honour, the deliberately disruptive Gamay has been released, bottling without appellation and without rules. Does that still apply?
No, it doesn't. I'm amused because I had heard this story about the 13th century, how anybody knew at that time. You're right. I think the Burgundy growers were virulent in trying to protect their position, actually, and they did try and stamp out Gamay for some reason. I mean, that's up to them. Sorry, what was the last point? I forgot what it was now.
Was it still bottled without an appellation?
Absolutely. Well, you could bottle it as l'appellation, but you'd have to call it something different. You couldn't call it Macon, or you couldn't call it Beaujolais or whatever.
It's the village name. It's the appellation.
Table or whatever it might be. There's no appellation for Gamay in itself. Grape varieties don't have an appellation per se. The ground they come from does.
Is Gamay grown widely elsewhere in the world than in France?
No, I should have made that point. No, it isn't. And I think that's quite interesting. I don't quite really know why, actually.
Doesn't really.
I mean, you can grow Pinot Noir elsewhere. There is Gamay grown, but it's very, very much centred on Beaujolais, which is a sort of mono viticultural region in that sense.
I can show you the 12 appellations of Beaujolais, if you like. There.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some nice ones.
And I mean, all of those are all wines by their appellation name, but they are all Gamay grape bases.
But I should stress the point, there's a massive difference between Beaujolais and even Beaujolais Village and all the other named cru, which lie to the north, south of Villefranche, which you see there. The quality is quite different. So Beaujolais is quite a complicated area. It's big producing and a huge difference in level of quality.
Martin, we're drinking a Beaujolais Supérieur, and I just wonder where that fits in on that chart.
Beaujolais Supérieur. Well, it could come from anywhere, David, actually. But I think superior simply means that the yields are slightly lower than the ordinary Beaujolais, and probably it needs another degree or half a degree of alcohol by volume. So that would qualify for the superior tag, but it could come from northeast, south, or west of the region. But the grower will tell you that. And if it's a negociant, you have to ask him where it came from. Mostly it would be blended up from, do you remember Duboeuf, a big name in the
Very well,
region?
yes.
He used to buy them all over the place and blend it up perfectly.
That was the same one as ours just now. What they've got there.
Can I just make a couple of comments? I was interested, Martin, in you were drinking a Burgundy from Marange, and I've actually got a Marange because I used this wine tasting as an opportunity because I brought back a case of Marange Premier Cru when we were last in France, actually, and it's now 5-6 years old, and I thought it was about time to have a tasting. So I thought I'd take the opportunity tonight to put it up against a Chambol-Musigny, which is Marange is, of course, right to the south of the Burgundy region. Chambol-Musigny up towards the north, and in amongst Gevrey-Chambertin, and not a long way from Romani-Conti, of course. The really expensive wines that you're doing. And I thought I'd put them together. And it's quite interesting because it's a 2014 Chambol-Musigny, and in taste they're very similar. But the Chambol-Musigny has got a wonderful nose. It's flowery, it's rich, it's, I don't know, I was going to say exuberant, which is a bit over the top, but it's absolutely beautiful nose. Yeah. But in terms of the drinking of the wine and so on, pretty similar, which is, quite interesting. But a little anecdote, because many years ago, must be 25 years ago now, we were with our children and we were going around the villages of the Burgundy and sampling the delights, and we duly went past the Romani-Conti and had photographs taken by the gates of their vineyard. And when we got home, our children, who were sort of 5 and 7, I think, at that time, we saw them assiduously scraping the mud off their boots, which is something that we'd never seen them do before. So we asked what they were up to. And Melissa, maybe the brighter of the two, said to us, or the older of the two, said, well, if it's worth £1 million an acre, which is what you said when we were there, we thought that at least what the scrapings off our boots would actually have some value. We rapidly disabused them and said that no, we weren't going to up their pocket money in exchange for some mud from the Romani-Conti, but.
Well, I hope you put them on your board straight away, Ray, because they have financial acumen. But that makes an interesting point, I think. Yes, you've got Chambol-Musigny up in the Côte de Nuit, and then you've got Marange, which is about just south of Fontenay, as I was saying earlier on. And they're both Pinot Noir. They're both wines of great integrity and style. And if you'd asked me before you told me what they actually tasted like, I would have said I would expect the Chambol-Musigny to be intensely elegant and fragrant, and the Marange to be slightly more rustic. I don't think rustic to be a pejorative term. I just think you're further south, and the soil is slightly different, so you're going to get Pinot Noir in a different manifestation, and a different price level too.
Though the Marange Premier Cru is not cheap.
No, but for Chambol-Musigny, it's not cheap either. No. I mean, I imagine Chambol-Musigny of any sort from anywhere would be pretty expensive these days. Well, I know it is actually.
Yeah, but it's a very fun area to go to because I don't know whether it was that year or another year, because we've normally gone to the vineyards each year for a holiday, and I found particularly in Chambol-Musigny, some really tiny growers, almost making it in their garages kind of thing, but really happy to talk and obviously to sell you wine, but to talk very knowledgeably about what they were serving up. And I think I've always had a love for Chambol-Musigny, compared to even to Gevrey-Chambertin next door.
Lovely, lovely.
Talking about...
I don't want to endlessly reminisce, although I find myself doing so more and more. But people in the past have said, oh, you've been around France buying from different growers. And often I would sit in somebody's kitchen and we'd do a deal on whatever I was buying. And they would say, have you ever been cheated? And I said, well, not as far as I'm aware. I mean, perhaps they were so good at cheating I didn't notice it. But I think my point is that wine growers love to talk about what they do. They're proud of what they do. They'll always tell you the truth, actually. They'll tell you about the fermentation temperatures. They'll tell you about the conditions of the vintage. They'll tell you about the yields they were going for. And I think that is lovely. And I've always loved that on a very, very sophisticated industry, if you like. There is this human side to it, which has always appealed to me enormously. And Burgundy is a very, very human place. And as you were saying earlier, it's smallish growers. They very often intermarry, don't they? You'll see different names mixed up together. If you've got a bit of land and you want to marry off your daughter, you want to marry somebody who's got a bit of land too.
Reminiscent of the of bringing back the soil, I was in Burgundy as a sort of student, and we visited Chazan-Montrachet, and I was very taken with the wonderful sort of top coating of the soil with these lovely red stones that they had, which apparently produce a sort of microclimate so that the temperature remains constant right through the summer period while the grapes are ripening. And I actually managed to bring 2 of those stones back. And I still have them. They're sitting in the window in the conservatory, which remind me very much of my trip to Burgundy.
Sorry, Martin, you were just saying about how they love to talk about it. Martin and I have some friends who live in Everett, and when you go down there, obviously in the Vendange, it's just amazing because there's so many tiny champagne houses that you just don't know about. And we happened to be out and about one Monday, which of course in rural France, everything closes on a Monday. Happened to stop and Dad came out and said, look, my children, I'm in charge on a Monday and I'm sort of really bored. Would you like to come in and have a look around and do a bit of a tasting? It was absolutely wonderful. We had some wonderful champagne.
Well, that's lovely to hear. And indeed, you reminded me that I left out something hugely important about Pinot Noir. Of course, a tremendous amount of Pinot Noir is grown in Burgundy, no doubt about it, but almost as much is grown in Champagne, actually. It's a huge component of Champagne, as we all know. And I left it out completely, whereas, because you don't taste it as Pinot Noir, do you? You taste it as sparkling white wine. But it's a massive growth. At one time, the Champagne Noir were producing more Pinot Noir than they were in Burgundy. That's been overtaken by events now. But I shouldn't have left out that very important region for growing Pinot Noir. So it's lovely to hear. Yeah.
A lovely echo, Paul, of your experiences in Chassagne-Montrachet, because we were in the village and it was absolutely tipping down with rain. And John, my brother-in-law, and I went into a winery and had a few glasses of, the wonderful Chassagne-Montrachet, and felt a lot better for that. And we came out and the rain had stopped, the sun was shining, and the church bells were ringing. And ever since then, when we've opened a bottle of Chassagne-Montrachet, I've always felt that the church bells were ringing.
Wonderful, just wonderful.
I love stories like that about wine.
I do too. I mean, because they're real. And I've always said that, perhaps I'm being a bit fanciful, when I was selling wine, when people buy wine at that level, you're peddling dreams and people are buying dreams. And I think that's absolutely wonderful. And when you sit round in November in England, when I'm sure it's beautiful down in Cornwall and Devon, but everywhere else it's not, and you think of those lovely moments and it brings it all back, doesn't it?
I must admit that, you know, with lockdown and so on, the thing that, you know, we used to travel a lot before lockdown, but the thing that I miss most is pottering about in little French villages, particularly in wine growing areas, and, you know, just enjoying local wines, even though they may not be spectacular. It's just something, and that I've missed that hugely through lockdown.
Well, Ray, you talk that language, you know, farmer to farmer.
And also I'm French, of course.
Yes, because you know, people think wine growers simply are farmers, aren't they?
Yes.
They convert their fruit themselves, or tend, not always, but mostly they do. So they are, without being too romantic, they're steeped in the soil, really.
Yeah. But I think the story bit is so important, you know, with having also during lockdown started our butchery business in North Devon, where we're selling our own meat and meat from other small farmers in the area. The thing that's coming across is how much people want to know the story of what they're eating, how it's grown, the kind of animals that they are, how they've been bred, how they've been, you know, treated, you know, whether they're organic or traditionally farmed or whatever. And I do think with food and wine, the story is so important to our enjoyment.
Ray, I couldn't agree with you more. In fact, last time we met on this tasting, you mentioned something about lambing, and no one knew what you were talking about. And we asked, and you came up with a wonderful story. I think we should have a Zoom meeting about lambing and farming and everything else. I mean, I think it's just wonderful. Because,
why not?
We all go and buy, well, I don't know, buy tins, but you know what I mean. We go to a supermarket, it comes in a packet, and you know, I don't know where it all comes from. I don't think what goes into making it. And I just think these are wonderful, real stories.
Well, we can't bring as my wife says, we can't bring a cow or a sheep into the room. But
why not?
If the master's willing to bring in one of our butchers so he can tell one or two anecdotes about and the butcher stories. I don't know. Maybe gentlefolk don't want to hear butcher stories.
Well, I'd rather see a live lamb than a dead one, Ray, actually. On the other hand.
It's a very interesting perception, because I often sort of go driving in the countryside in the spring and see all these lovely lambs and think of mint sauce. I don't know what.
When you see piglets, you think of chipolatas, don't you?
Apple sauce, actually.
Martin, bringing animals to the meeting. We had a past master in the Scientific Instrument Makers Company, a Welshman, and he is a farmer and he has sheep. And we had I think one of the biggest dinners, you know, the Achievement Award dinner or something like that. And his wife, the mistress, kept leaving the table because she had a couple of sheep in the back of the car that she had to tend to, because she brought them all the way up from Wales because they needed someone with them all the time. She was out there in her evening dress looking after the sheep. So that was in Southwark, you know, you think.
Nick, we have the makings of another evening here.
Yeah, I think we do. I'm just thinking about what Martin was saying about not being able to sort of enjoy the sort of Burgundies that we all know. Now, here's one that this is one of the ones I tasted in the latter part.
Wow. Yep.
I treated myself to that because I found it in the cellar on New Year's Eve.
Ooh.
And it was very fortuitous because I didn't have to share it because there was only one of us here.
Lucky you.
Oh, well. Or I'm available next New Year's Eve to join.
We might have an imposed lockdown for you, Richard, by then.
Many years ago, I used to commute from Sevenoaks into London, and on the day the Beaujolais Nouveau was released, the local round table went over to France and came back with vast quantities. So when I was queuing up for the 824 from Sevenoaks to Cannon Street, they were selling this Beaujolais Nouveau, freezing cold, in a horrible little plastic cup at about a tenner a time for charity. And that put me off Beaujolais Nouveau evermore.
Does it come out on the 17th of November? Is it always that date?
I think it's still is the same sort of. It's whatever Thursday is nearest to that, Nick. Really.
Oh, Thursday.
I don't mean to rubbish it, but it went too quickly, too far, actually. And wine was. I mean, it was a wonderful thing for a big producer, because he made his wine, got his money before Christmas. I mean, unbelievable in our industry, really.
Martin, do you remember the Wine Trade 40 Club that used to have a Beaujolais Nouveau tasting at the RAC Club? And there was tables down the centre of the room of some 100, 200 odd Beaujolais Nouveaux that had all arrived that morning, and there was a comparative tasting.
Well, I certainly remember hearing about it. I'm not sure I ever went to any. I mean, but by that time, yeah, I mean, it was overdone. It was started by the Sunday Times, wasn't it? This race, do you remember?
That's right, absolutely.
Not the idea. And the race then grew out of all proportion. I mean, people were actually killing themselves on their way to Calais, and so it was all rather... But Nick, you were going to ask me something.
Well, no, I was just going to say, unfortunately, Sergio couldn't join me this evening, so I decided to go and buy a half bottle. So I have spent the same amount of money that some other people have bought, and I have bought a half bottle of Santenay. And it has been absolutely a joy.
Yeah.
The only problem is I'm on my very last sip. I'm trying to work out what to do next.
Well, you should have bought the bottle. That's the idea.
Who's the producer, Nick? Who's the grower?
Now, it is Vincent Moret et Sophie.
Say again.
Vincent Moret.
Moret.
And Sophie. And I think there's several Morets.
Yeah, it's quite a Burgundian name, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, well, that's lovely.
Absolutely beautiful. Really
fantastic. Lovely. Where did you buy it from?
I bought it from a place called Taurus Wines, who are very close to us. And
they're a specialist wine.
And I'm sort of supporting them a little bit.
Lovely.
It has a sheep story for you.
Can I tell a sheep story?
Go on.
Caroline and Robin Arculus often spent Easter Day with us, and one Easter Sunday they were in our house, but Caroline kept running out into the courtyard to open the boot to feed her lambs that she had in the back of the car.
The glass sellers are real people, aren't they, really?
I'm sure they were really in front of the Arga.
The tea chest at the back of the car.
Paul, we had a brief visit from Zorro just then. Was that you being mischievous?
No.
It was me, sorry.
The master was wearing his Zorro getup.
Reminiscent of that poor man who addressed a council meeting, was it, or something?
That's funny.
The court. The cat.
Oh, that was the court man, yeah.
Yes. The court, it was a court. Yes, it was. He was a barrister in court. One of his children found the secret of choosing a video filter, and which is very easy to do.
Master, put your Zorro on again.
Martin, can I come back very, very quickly to Pinot Noir again and Epernay? We stayed a delightful couple of days in Epernay a few years ago, and we were aware that, in fact, it's obviously champagne there, but there's often Pinot Noir in Champagne, and I've been told that it makes it softer. Would you like to make a comment about that?
Pinot Noir and Champagne. Well, I mean, you've got Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and Pinot Meunier, the three prescribed varieties. And Pinot Noir and Chardonnay are the classy ones, really. And Pinot Noir is a large component of most blends, as a matter of fact. Pinot Meunier is fine, but it tends to give the fat and a bit of weight to your champagne. But the Pinot Noir adds all the things we've been talking about: delicacy, fragrance, warmth, and everything else. But of course, we all know, if you draw the juice off a grape, it doesn't absorb any color, and therefore it is, it's a colorless, or rather, it looks sort of yellowy, whatever, doesn't it? Really. I mean, most blends are, one third. Well, no, they're not actually. Sometimes you get 50% Pinot Meunier, 1/3, whatever it might be, depending. But the more Pinot Noir and Chardonnay you get, the better the champagne tends to be. Put it that way.
Thank you. In which case, a Blanc de Blanc, which of course has got no Pinot Noir, nearly never going to be as good.
Sorry.
Is that never going to be as good, champagne?
Well, a Blanc de Blanc is going to be all Pinot Chardonnay, but Chardonnay rather. Not Pinot, Chardonnay.
Yeah.
Did I say Pinot Blanc? I'm so sorry. I should have said Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Meunier. I do beg your pardon. There's no Pinot Blanc. Champagne is Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier. So a Blanc de Blanc would be made of all Chardonnay. Pure Chardonnay.
Perhaps we should have a champagne tasting.
Oh,
we did.
That sounds good.
The first tasting we had was champagne, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, it was bubble. It was sparkling wine.
Sparkling wine, then. You're right.
Some did drink sparkling wine, and some did drink champagne.
Yeah, that's it.
He's forgotten all about it. Pretty bad sparkling wine.
Yes, I remember you saying so. You were quite derogative about it.
There's no such thing, Joe. All wine's good, I think, really.
And as the sun starts to shine, what about a rosé in the summer?
We can certainly consider it.
Yeah, that's what this was.
Every other week, we do a Waitrose order.
I was in hospital.
I know, you are speaking, yeah. We do a Waitrose order, and in order to secure the slot, you have to order something, and it has to be over £40.
Oh.
So every time I order a £62 bottle of champagne, and you can then nearer the time go and adjust the order. And I haven't yet been caught out, but there may come a time when I end up on the table with a £62 bottle of champagne.
I have to admit, we have had 2 bottles of Nightimber delivered by Waitrose. That satisfied the same thing.
Yes, I do my mother's weekly shopping, and I reserve the slot by ordering her a 2 boxes of wine, 2 3-litre boxes, which I normally cancel, but one particular time I forgot to do the registration properly, and all he delivered was 2 3-litre bottles of wine because she didn't get her shopping at all.
That is the danger.
One of those things. I think, ladies and gentlemen,
I had an elderly aunt who used to drink the wine boxes, and she complained bitterly to me. It says on the box it will last for 3 weeks. It doesn't. It only lasts 2 days.
It's one of the reasons I don't like boxed wine, is that you never can gauge how much you're actually drinking. Just keep filling the glass up.
Till you fall over.
Only wants to talk about his Pinot Noir.
Martin, can I just ask you? I got this one from Aldi.
Yeah.
They're $5.99.
Yeah.
That's the Pinot Noir, Vignoble Roussillon.
Roussillon.
Rousselet.
Rousselet, okay.
Vin de France. Now, to be quite frank, it's quite thin and a little bit insipid. It's not bad, but I'm not enjoying that terribly much. However, the Georges de Boeuf Fleury, which I got for £9 down at
Sainsbury's.
Yeah. Pam and I are thoroughly enjoying.
Yeah, mine is too.
Yeah. So.
Well, what do you expect from Aldi? Try Lidl next time.
Tony, don't be such a cheapskate. Go and spend £10 a bottle.
What? £10?
Enough for me to do that.
Well, your Pinot Noir, I'm sure, will have its merits, but probably it comes from the south of France somewhere. I can't tell by it without looking at the label more closely.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if it's grown in the south, it's going to have a problem, really, to start with. But
Yep, just coming shortly.
Nope.
Cooking.
Anyway.
I think, ladies and gentlemen, we're coming up to time. I think it's been quite a fascinating evening, and I hope you've all enjoyed it. Another adventure, which has been well worth it. Thank you so much, Martin. I'm sure the master will say something to close us out. I'll just say that next week, unfortunately, our past master, David Williams Thomas, who was going to talk about the Williams Thomas dynasty of glassmaking, of which he's the 7th generation, was rushed into hospital on Monday and has had a new pacemaker fitted. He's doing well and arrived home yesterday afternoon. So instead of him giving you his story, you are going to have the delights of cooking at home with the clock. So I will send the details out over the weekend of the logins, and meantime I'll hand over to the master to say good night.
Martin, thank you so much for another fabulous evening. The depth and breadth of your knowledge of wines is quite extraordinary, really. You seem to have been everywhere except for Romania. So I'm very proud to be able to produce a wine from an area that you had not visited. But it's in general, I mean, partly the wine itself, but also your wonderful tales of your adventures and other people's tales generate a very a great atmosphere of bonhomie, and we've had a lovely time together, and it's entirely due to your leadership of it, and also to the clerk's brilliant administration. So thank you to you both, Paul and Martin. I asked you to raise your hands and give them a clap and bid you all good evening, and at least I haven't got 2 bottles to drink, only 1.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you.
I feel sorry for Nick, who's only got half a bottle.
He's finished.
She's finished, exactly. Good night,
another one. It's all right.
Good night.
Good night. Have a pleasant evening.
Good night, everybody.
Good night. God bless.